Hey everybody, it's Jonathan. Good to see you. We are going to cancel that, remove that from the broadcast, saving the changes. We're live. So hey everybody, it's happy Friday night, coronavirus Friday day, whatever it is where you're living. Trying some new technology. Thought I'd do it tonight. Used this yesterday to kind of great results. People were really excited about it, so I thought, hey, why not? I'll test it a little bit more tonight. So if you're seeing me live, welcome. Leave me a comment and let me know where you're from. That way. I can just see who I'm reaching and where I'm reaching you, and whether you stay with me for this whole thing or not, that's okay. Just leave me a quick comment. Let me know where you are. So, yeah, so I'm Jonathan Edwards. I'm Olympian Jonathan Edwards. If this is the first time you're seeing with me, I am a mental performance coach now. I've been doing this for a long time. Work with athletes across the world, which is fun. But I also work with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of executives now, which is kind of fun too. So I did this. I did this topic yesterday for some athletes, and it was really kind of mind blowing. So as you may know, like I refer to athletes now as athletes in sports and life because I believe that even if you might have been an athlete when you're young, but now as we go through life, we got to be athletes later too. And so just adopting the mentality of an athlete, whether you're in sport or you're in life, is really helpful. And I'm actually working on a book right now called "You've Got This. Here's How," which is pretty timely considering what we're all going through with this whole coronavirus thing. So yes, I'm really excited about that because I really believe that we can, by using the power of games and sport, we can apply that to anything and really make things happen. So tonight I wanted to talk about the five love languages, and so I wanted to recommend a book that I read ages ago, a long time ago, by a guy named Gary Chapman. It's called The Five Love Languages. And when I first saw that book, when I first read it, I actually saw Gary Chapman speak live. And little did I know that this was going to affect me for my entire life. And so, whether you're an athlete or you're not, or whether you're married or you're not, or you're single or you're not, doesn't matter. This is really going to be helpful for you. And I hope you'll share this with athletes or coaches and parents because it's really it's really a book that applies to everybody, which is really really cool. So tonight, though, we're going to talk a little bit about it, though, in terms of athletes and coaches and parents and things like that. And because this was really a game changing book for me in my life because I didn't really understand this in as kind of a general rule, right? How we get along with each other, how we get along with our spouse, how get along with our relationships, and specifically tonight I want to talk a little bit about athletes and coaches. So one of the things that happened this week, for those of you, you may not be a football fan, I am, but stay with me here because we witnessed the breakup of the greatest athlete coach tandem probably in history, and that was Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. So I don't care if you like them or not. That's not the point. But I want to just address something. So the reason they broke up, right? The reason for this split can really be boiled down to the issue of love languages. And people look at this from the outside and they think like, oh, Coach Belichick is, stubborn and Tom Brady is stubborn and they're just two, egotistical men like going at it and whatever. But it really boils down to love languages. And I'm going to talk about that tonight. Right. So what's really important to understand is that we all have our own primary way with which we feel appreciated. And you can kind of interchange the word love for appreciation in this case, right? It's really the same. And so the critical point there is that we each have our own way with which we like to be appreciated. And then what ends up happening is that we think naturally that that's how everybody else feels. And that inherently is the disconnect because if you're in a relationship, it doesn't matter if it's husband, wife, or, you're just, girlfriend, boyfriend, or it's coach, athlete, or athlete, teacher, parent, the whole thing. The mistake is when you think that everybody is the same as you. And so if you appreciate things. If you show signs of or appreciation a certain way, you expect to get that in return, and that's not really the way this works. And that's what Gary Chapman taught me ages ago. And it's really a major sticking point in any relationship, right? You know, boss and worker, and coach, athlete, student, teacher, you name it. So I want to go through these tonight and put them. The book is written in terms of a personal relationship, like a husband and wife sort of thing. But I really started to apply this because this year in particular, in 2020, 2019, going into 2020, a lot of the athletes I was working with, a lot of my clients, a lot of issues they were having stemming with other people really came down to what I'm about to share with you tonight, right? And it's what I learned from Gary Chapman's book called The Five Love Languages. So here's the thing. The first love language is words of affirmation. Now, if that is yours, then you're going to go, yeah, that's totally true. But if it's not yours, you're going to be like, what do you mean, words of affirmation? People don't need that. That's just like buttering them up. You know what? So this is inherently the problem with most relationships is that right here we've identified it already. If when you hear that words of affirmation are the first love language, you may either go yeah and accept it or dismiss it. So here's the thing. Words of affirmation, to use the Patriots Tom Brady example this week, one of the common threads that came up in all this was that Tom Brady didn't feel appreciated by his coach, Bill Belichick. And when you dive into these two personalities, you find that Bill Belichick, his coaching style is to not tell people that they're doing a great job. He might do it a little bit, but he's not like overflowing with it. And for Tom Brady, what he wanted and what he needed was to hear that. He wanted to hear words of affirmation. All right. And that in turn, you get a disconnect. The coach feels like he's giving up his power and authority by telling his athlete that, hey, you're doing a great job. You're the best quarterback ever. I appreciate having you. That's just not his language, right? That's not Coach Belichick's language, but it was Tom Brady's language, and he wasn't getting it, right? And so as we go through these, we'll start to share some more examples, and you'll see where this breakdown occurs. It's really fascinating, right? So the first love language is words of affirmations, okay? The second love language is gifts, gift giving, right? So I got this funny comment yesterday on the Facebook Live I did yesterday on this topic from one of the coaches that is in my group, and he goes, his love language is words of affirmation, and his wife's love language is gift giving. So, which basically rolls out to she tells him like, "Hey, honey, you're doing a great job. Now buy me a car," right? Like that sort of thing. So, so for the person whose love language is gift giving, well, if they like receiving gifts, they will not feel very loved if they're not receiving gifts. In turn, they might like to give gifts to people as their way of expressing their love. And that's great. That makes them feel good. But if the person on the other end doesn't really care much about about receiving gifts, well, it's going to fall, that act of love is going to fall flat, right? Now, from an athlete perspective, because I want to bring this around just to kind of athletes a little bit, for athletes, the act of being given a gift tells them that, hey, that person was thinking about them, that look what they got for me. And for some athletes, getting a trophy, a medal, an award, recognition like athlete of the week or things like that, it kind of falls into both categories of words of affirmation, like if you're the athlete of the week or the athlete of the month. But also if you receive something for that, like a little trophy, that makes you feel good. When an athlete, when we reserve the medals for the top three places, then an athlete who finishes fourth, fifth, or sixth out of the medals is not going to feel very great. They didn't get anything from this experience. And now as coaches, what a lot of times we say is like, well, kids need to earn that. And that's true. That's totally true. But along the way, there's other ways to keep that athlete kind of somewhat not just motivated, but appreciated. Like, so they feel appreciation. And that's if their language is gifts, then they're going to want to receive that. And if they don't receive those gifts, they're going to feel somewhat hollow. They're not going to feel very loved or appreciated. And that's pretty interesting to understand. Okay. So that's love language number 2, which is gifts and gift giving. Love language number 3 is acts of service. Okay. So acts of service is interesting because when you think from just a normal, like everyday relationship, acts of service might be like taking out the trash or doing the dishes or mopping the floor, taking the dog for a walk. Those are all acts of service. Now, how can we relate that into other situations? Well, in an athlete situation, athlete coach, I know whenever I was competing as an athlete, I always felt better when my teammates were also working to the level that I was working at, right? That was their act of service, right? And if an athlete wasn't doing that, then I didn't feel very good about them, right? I felt like that they were hurting us as a team. When I got into coaching, I realized that, hey, if I didn't see athletes who were working hard, that was what I was looking for as a coach. So their effort was actually an act of service to the overall team, to the overall program. And if that wasn't there, I didn't feel good. But to that athlete, they may not make that connection. Like, hey, if we put forth this effort, then coach is going to like me, or coach is going to show love to me, because this is where it gets a little complicated between athlete and coach. Or if the coach has this, or the boss in this case, where their love language is active service and they're not getting it, well, they're going to feel pretty disappointed, and they might get pretty bummed out, and they might get pretty aggressive, right? So when athletes and coaches have disconnects here, these tend to fall apart within these first 3 love languages, right? So words of affirmation, gift giving, and acts of service. Those are the kind of the first 3 where we see that kind of disconnect. The last 2 are pretty interesting because the last 2 love languages sometimes are just not possible, right? And in this day and age that we're kind of getting into in the world of sports, in the world of youth sports especially, is that these are getting even more and more disconnected. And I have to say that I think now with what's going on with the coronavirus, we're going to have even a little bit more trouble with these 2 love languages as we go forward, right? So the 4th love language, all right, is quality time, right? So I know a lot of athletes who, as the season progresses, they really wish they had more of a relationship with their coach. And what they're saying at that point in time is that the relationship that they want to have based on quality time with their coach, some alone time, some one-on-one. And I think a lot of coaches do a pretty bad job of giving their athletes quality time. And I know that's really hard because for some programs, let's say you're Alabama football and you're Nick Saban, one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he's got like 100 athletes. He's not going to be able to give quality time to all of those athletes. It's why you have assistant coaches. And so this creates a little bit of a disconnect because if the athlete feels that they're only, getting love if they're having quality time with their head coach, it may just not be possible. So what they're asking for, what they're seeking is not possible, right? So if that athlete grew up and they had a lot of quality time with mom or dad, and that was really how they felt connected, and now they get with a team and they don't have any of that with this person who they are hoping to that they're looking to impress, that they're looking to basically to impress, right? I think of videos I've seen of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick when they have like their weekly quarterback meeting with the head coach. So it would be Tom Brady and Bill Belichick in his office, right? That is quality time. But to each of those 2, that's not their main love language, right? So they're spending that time together. They're very business oriented. They're doing their thing. So it's not really creating the bond that a lot of people would think that would create because that's their love language, right? If your love language is quality time, you might look at that and go like, why is there a problem? They're spending all this time together. That makes total sense. But to each of them, it's not quality time, or that's not a love language. They're just doing what they need to do in order to win. And internally, it's different. It's acts of service and it's words of appreciation, those sorts of things. So so quality time is love language number 4. Now, the 5th love language, all right, the final love language, and it looks like, oh my God, I didn't even write it down. Hold on, I'm going to fill it in here because number 5 is physical touch. All right, physical touch. Did I get this? There we go. All right, physical touch. So, this is a really interesting one when it comes to athletes and coaches for a lot of reasons, and you probably know where I'm going there. In the last number of years, we've had more and more instances of coaches who've kind of taken this physical touch thing a bit too far, right? Whether it's it was the Penn State investigation a number of years ago, or it's Larry Nassar and the USA gymnastic team. Like, those are all horrible experiences where the idea of physical touch has been taken too far, right? To the person involved doing the touching, that was a love language for them. For the person receiving the touching, not so much. But those are two like extreme examples. So I hope you can let me give that example. But if we take that down a bit and just kind of boil it down to like a coach who wants to give like a high five or a hug, right? How many times have you seen a coach give a hug to an athlete and the athlete looks really, kind of awkward, but the coach is showing their best emotion, right? And that's their love language is, I just want to give you a hug, sort of thing, right? And so they go and do it. But to the athlete, it's a little different, right? But to an athlete where physical touch is their love language, then it's all great. It's all good news, right? But we're in a society now where physical touch has been kind of, it's almost been frowned upon. Like we have rules now to protect athletes from those coaches where they might take it a little bit too far, right? Or a lot bit too far, right? And we have to keep people separated. We have to keep, we have to have male and female and everybody just keep an eye on it, right? Which is important. But if that is your only love language, that person is now at a disconnect. And it's something that we have to be really cognizant of, because certain athletes, depending on what their love language is, if they're working with a coach, they're going to have trouble because they can't necessarily share their love language openly, right? For fear of what could happen and for fear of how kind of society is going. And that can cause a little bit of a disconnect. What I've noticed this year is I've worked with athletes this year from 2019, 2020, where when they've had issues with their coaches, that it falls into this love language relationship. And I don't mean love in a sexual way. That's not it at all. It's just what we do as human beings. It's like, if I want to appreciate you, I'm going to appreciate you with my love language, with what comes naturally to me. And I may not be aware of what yours is. Right. So if I give you a gift and that means a lot to me, well, and that doesn't mean anything to you, then you're not getting the full extent of what I'm trying to share with you, right? Conversely, if I have an athlete where their love language is physical touch or quality time, and as a coach, I'm too busy or I can't do that, well, they're going to feel disappointed. And that's not the coach's fault. That's actually the athlete's just awareness and their receptivity to the love language being shown to them. So what I want to share with you tonight, and I hope you'll share with your athlete and you share with your coaches, other parents, is just this idea, this understanding of, we all show love and we all receive love and appreciation in these 5 categories, right? So we've got words of affirmation, gift giving, we've got acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. And if there's a disconnect, you can primarily boil it down to one of these 5. And that's really important to understand, because sometimes what happens is an athlete especially will feel they won't feel appreciated. And it's not for their lack of effort, it's not for their results, but it's just the way the love relationship, love, not sexually, but just love relationship between the coach and the athlete, between the program and the athlete. And that goes a long way. If we can identify how our athletes are feeling, what our athletes need, how they need it, how they need to feel, be shown appreciation, and how they need to receive it. If we understand that, it's going to go a long way. Because one of my college athletes this year, Division I program, freshman athlete, new to the program, one of the best athletes on the team, but the disconnect between the athlete and the coach was huge. Right now, I have interactions with the athlete. I don't have interaction with the coach. But when I shared with the athlete and the parents that, all right, this is where the breakdown is coming. This athlete in particular wanted quality time with the coach, but the coach couldn't give it. The head coach couldn't give it. The interesting thing was the assistant coach was giving lots of quality time to this athlete. But because the athlete was looking for it from the head coach, which wasn't possible, the athlete felt like they just felt unloved. And it really wasn't the case. So once we identified that, right, the athlete was able to go, yo, I get it now. I understand. And that just, it was like unleashing the athlete, because now they understood the dynamic, and they were able to basically persevere. They were able to almost forgive the coach. Not that the coach needed to be forgiven. It was more the athlete having to basically understand that, oh, this is the situation we're in, and I understand that the coach can't give me what I'm needing. But once the athlete understood that that wasn't possible, the athlete was able to get by knowing that was the situation. So I hope that makes sense, right? So listen, do me a favor. If you're watching this on the replay or anything, you can email me at coachedwards@athletespecific.com and just tell me, like, how, where do you notice this breakdown with your athlete or coach, or maybe you're an athlete in life and you're dealing with a boss or loved one. Let me know what your love language is, and let me know, what you think maybe that person you've had trouble with, what their love language is, or what you might assume it to be, right? Because then when you identify that disconnect, it's really going to make a difference. So listen, I hope you enjoyed this. If you're coming in late, that's totally cool. I get it. I hope you're having a great Friday night with coronavirus and all that. But listen, what I do all day, every day, is I work with athletes in sports and life. And if you fall into that category, if you've got a big challenge you're trying to overcome, then I would love to help you. And I have programs and coaching programs, but you can just reach out to me, and we can just talk a little bit about what you're going through. Right now, this coronavirus thing is a pretty big challenge for all of us, and it's been really kind of interesting to see how we've all dealt with this, right? So I hope that you're having a great, as I'm doing this live on a Friday night, a great Friday. Looking forward to the weekend, but listen, stay positive, stay strong, and stay tuned for more of these. If you liked it, do me a favor and just leave me a like or a comment or thumbs up. Facebook really loves that. It's really helpful if you're watching on YouTube as well, or listening to our podcast on iTunes. So I'm happy to help. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye.